God eftermiddag og rigtig hjertelig velkommen. Klokken den er netop passeret 14, og det betyder, at vi starter dagens webinar. Jeg hedder Morten Holm, og jeg er salgschef i F-Secure. Og jeg har fået fornøjelsen af at introducere jer til dagens webinar, hvor temaet er Cloud Protection for Office 365, og hvordan vi i F-Secure tænker avanceret sikkerhed ind i vores 365 beskyttelse. Vi er en del på dagens webinar, og jeg vil gerne opfordre til, at hvis der er spørgsmål undervejs, at de bliver skrevet ind i chatten, helst på engelsk, og så bliver de forhåbentlig alle sammen besvaret, når vi lakker mod enden. Men helt praktisk, så bliver webinaret optaget, og det betyder altså, at hvis man ikke kan se webinaret til enden, eller har lyst til at dele det med en kollega senere hen, så kan man tilgå den her on-demand version, som vi nok skal sørge for at blive sendt ud. I dag har vi fornøjelsen af at præsentere en speaker, der hedder Nidhi Singh, som er vores egen senior product owner, og Nidhi har været med til at forme F-Secure strategi og produkt inden for den her 365 beskyttelse. Og sådan helt naturligt vil jeg derfor slå over i engelsk og give ordet videre til Nidhi. So Nidhi, can you hear me?
Yes, Morten.
Fantastic. So I would just like to say, first of all, pleasure to introduce you as the speaker of the webinar today. I believe it's really great having you to introduce this Office 365 Cloud Protection, especially to the audience of the day. And I sincerely hope that your presentation will will take the audience and give the audience an excessive experience. So if you're ready to present, I will basically just, hand over the word.
Yes, I'm ready. Thanks, Morten.
You're welcome.
So, a very good afternoon to everybody on my behalf as well. So, as Morten introduced me, but a little bit about myself, that I'm basically here presenting today a very new addition to F-Secure's portfolio, which is our product that we launched this summer, early summer, so Cloud Protection for Office 365. And I'm here going to talk about first that why there is a need for this product, and also what kind of threat vector that exists. That's the reason that why we launched this product in the first place. And then I'm also going to a little bit talk about what the product is all about and how it can help you as a customer for protecting your assets, in this case email, and other types of collaboration platforms as well. So to begin with, like the crux of the matter that I wanted to basically leave you with the thought is that after this, hopefully it gives you some idea that there is a high likelihood that you probably don't know who else is using your account. So let's see what I have to back that basically the information that I'm going to share now. So as we all know, I think time after time, various studies have proved that email is basically the biggest attack vector especially for malware. So the commodity attacks or the traditional attacks which existed for like as long as we know that the virus type or malware types exist. So email is used as an attack vector for malware, and this is based on one of the Verizon's study that I'm showing you the data, but there are many other studies as well done by Forrester and Gartner who also states the same facts, that email remains to be the biggest attack vector, because it's like an easy in for the users, that you can easily get access via email to the kind of the biggest number of users of the email itself in a company. So it becomes easy for the attackers to use email-based attacks. Like there are many different forms in which they can reach you via email. There could be a link or a URL, as you say in simple words, which is then malicious, which then do other activities in addition to just kind of downloading the malware. And then there are attachments which are direct, like exploits sometimes, that they are in the emails which the users receive, and then clicking on those basically makes the system kind of available to the attacker, that they get easily access. Then there are, like, nowadays the email attacks are not only limited to just like specific malware that they drop via attachments or links, but then the email body itself is used or exploited in a way that even malwares are hidden behind the images that you see. A signature of somebody which looks very innocent, but then simply accidentally clicking on that signature could make your machine basically accessible by the attacker. So basically the extent of email based attacks is quite wider nowadays. But what kind of attacks basically are done via email, which are then not really malware specific? So as basically the emails are used for malwares, but then they are also used equally in big numbers for phishing attacks. And phishing attacks are basically used by attackers to not only basically drop malwares into your system, but also do bigger damage to the company by getting into the company organization. And phishing in this case is most common and primary attack vector, because again, phishing is easy to do in the sense that there is so much difficulty in detecting different types of phishing attacks that exist out there, that phishing is just not one word in itself. Phishing is basically like it's you can basically think of phishing as a bigger entity, and then it has its various types which then are different from each other, and then detecting one type doesn't mean that you cover all the different types that the phishing have. So for example, I can give you some very kind of common types of phishing attacks, which are like not even in the commodity threats. So commodity threats are basically that which are like really for widespread. So there are those phishing attacks that exist as well, that you have those phishing campaigns done via spam emails, which are looking for targeting as many users as they can once the phishing email lands into your system. But then that's not it. Phishing goes beyond that. And why? There are different types of phishings, like non-targeted attacks, which means that in this case, the attempt is not only targeted attacks, not targeted attacks, in which the attempt is not only to basically get into the system, but to target some specific information from the company, and that's where the phishing attacks become targeted. The different types of targeted phishing attacks are like spear phishing, in which the specific users with the specific intent are being like followed on social media, on their social networking websites, where they are being kind of followed, and then learn that how the user is behaving, and then those users are targeted specifically. And those users could be like, in most cases, because the main idea of phishing is to get into the system, get into the organization, and do maximum damage. So they want to look for the targets which are like high potential, in the sense that maybe a financial employee or an HR employee who has really access to the data that with which the attackers can do maximum damage. So spear phishing is one of that example. And then whaling, where they really targets the executives of the company, because once you make executive a target, then using that executive's persona or impersonating that executive, you can basically target other lower levels of employee in the company. So there is all of these types of non-targeted targeted phishing attacks exist. Then another very common types of phishing attacks, which are becoming like common very recently, and they are called business email compromises, where phishing is used to not only to impersonate, but also basically these attacks come sometimes from your known entities. So in that case, there are third parties, your customers probably, or if you are in a supply chain type of environment, then it might be your partners are basically impersonated to be used as like a entity to enter your organization. In this case, for example, you might receive email from your partner saying that, oh, this invoice was pending, can you please transfer this amount immediately to my account, and so on and so forth. So they basically use the pretext that you are known, you know that this third party I work with, I receive such invoices, and then they just use those kinds of lure to target. So that's basically to explain you that the extent of phishing is not really just malware anymore. Here it's a very basic example that when I say that phishing is why phishing attacks works, because in most of the cases phishing attacks works because generally how they lure people is using already existing systems. So they will use Office 365 emails for quarantine notifications and modify it in a way that it still looks like a legitimate email. For example, in this case, with human eye or as a user, you can't really differentiate between these two emails. The one on the left is the fake email, and then the one on the right is the real Office 365 quarantine email. In this case, with the user, as a user, you probably don't notice any difference, but there is a difference. That one that is originated from an attacker's system, and the other one is legitimate. And in this case, the user probably just rely, and then he says that, okay, I have been receiving quarantine emails, so let's just do what it asked me to do. And in this case, you click on the review button, and then it might ask you to log in with your credentials, because for whatever reason it says that your login doesn't work, and then it asks you to enter your credentials, and then that's basically where it basically gets hold of your credentials. But in this case, user is not to be blamed, because they do look very official and very sophisticated, the emails. There is not much that you can basically differentiate as such looking at the emails. So in that case, it becomes difficult for the human eye to differentiate between these types of sophisticated attacks which the attackers could do. So in that case, you have to really detect those attacks before they reach the users, because if you rely only on user, then most of the cases user will click on this, user will get targeted by this link. So it is really important that you detect it as early as possible. Then another question that basically raises is that what's the reason for phishing? What's in it for the attackers to use phishing as a threat vector? Well, most of the time, the reason for phishing is to get the credentials from the user. And why credentials? Because credentials are the things that they can use further to expand their attack. In this case, the study have shown excuse me, the studies have shown that phishing breaches are mostly done to get access to the credentials. And in this case, if a phishing campaign leads to even one of the compromised credential in a company, then that's enough for the attacker, because with this only one account, they can do maximum amount of damage if it gets undetected. So even one compromised credential is enough for the whole campaign that they did. So in other words, phishing is not independent in itself. There is a reason why phishing happened. And the reason is that they are after the credentials of the users. And once the credentials are compromised, sorry, it's basically game over for the company, because even getting access to one user means that attacker can get into any system of the company. Because if you have access to an employee who have access to further systems, because nowadays, especially with the Microsoft Office 365, all the services use single sign-on. You can use one account, log in once, and then the account login can work for months even. So in that case, you don't even need to enter the credentials again and again into different system, but it just works nicely. So as a vendor who provides that functionality, it's a very basic need for the user. But for attacker, that's a very good advantage, because getting access to that one account, he can basically get access to many systems that user have access to. So the extent of damage once the access to credentials becomes available is very, very high. And another study, just to show you that it's not only just one study which says this, but there is another study which talks about the same thing, but in a different angle. And the angle is that the compromised accounts, they are very costlier in the sense that it is, once the account gets compromised, it is costlier because they are hard to detect. You cannot really detect whether an account sending an email is a valid user who is sending that email or an attacker who is sending that email. So it gets really costly to detect the problems that those compromised attack cause. And in that sense, it becomes costlier for the companies to detect those types of attacks. And also why it is costlier, because the extent of damage that you can do with those compromised account is just exponential and unlimited for the attacker. So it is then costlier for the company to detect that. To summarize, what is a compromised credential? Well, a credential itself has no meaning. A compromised credential is basically a whole compromised account. That means that with that one password and one email address or a username that the attacker have access to, he basically compromise the one user or one user account in a organization. And that is an easy way for the attacker to enter into the organization. That's the first thing, definitely. But then another thing is that once the user get into the organization, it is more and more difficult for the company itself to detect. And then detecting is difficult because it's a legitimate user account. You as an administrator or you as the company IT guy cannot really differentiate whether it's a known user who is basically logging into your Office 365 account, or is it an attacker. Also, a compromised accounts, as mentioned earlier as well, provides unlimited possibilities to not only compromise the email itself via which the attacker gets access, but also to compromise other internal systems. And it is not only related to Office 365 related systems, but you could get access to, let's say, some ERP systems, because you end up compromising a financial employee, or you end up compromising an HR employee. And in that case, not only just having access to Office 365 related services, but you get access to other services that this user might have access to. And then using that, you basically could get hold of intellectual property of the company. So the extent just keeps on increasing and increasing with that compromised account. But what to do? So as we have seen, email attacks are hard to get rid of. There will be definitely always email attacks. There are different types. There is malware and commodity attacks, which nowadays maybe are not the most difficult ones to detect. But the difficult ones to detect are those which don't really use nowadays commodity malware, but those which use maybe social engineering or other types of phishing attacks, which then are hard for the companies to detect. and then lead to also compromised credentials. But detecting those compromised credentials or compromised accounts fast or early enough in the chain of attack is basically the key to getting those accesses back. And how you can get those accesses back is that once you know that the compromised account is there in your company, then you change the password. If needed, even you can re-image the computer for which the account was compromised, or you enable multi-factor authentication. So there are many different ways how you can reclaim. And now, why we are talking about all of this? Because the entry point is still email. How those accounts get compromised is email. And Microsoft Office 365 is the most popular target for email attacks. Why? Because as per the data from early this year, it is still the most used system in the corporate systems. So there are 258 million corporate seats in Microsoft Office 365. So there are 258 million users who are using Microsoft Office 365, and that is a huge number, and that's why there is a lot of potential for email-based attacks in Office 365 itself. Also, because Office 365 is so commonly used, there is also the attackers have good amount of access to the systems. They can even have access to the APIs to go and see what those APIs are all about. So then when they create attacks for this system, they are pretty much quite sophisticated. So in that sense, it becomes hard to detect that. And once they do that, then also the campaigns that they do around it, and then the attacks that they do around it becomes very, very, very difficult to detect. But then they don't exist only for certain limit or certain seat size. They exist basically for all types of companies. A small company which have something to protect, even if with 10 seats, if it's a company which deals with intellectual property or have sufficient amount of data that they want to protect, in that case they will get target of this kind of attacks. And that's why even if a small company is using Office 365, they still need to protect their premises. But is email only the attack vector? Well, that might be the case if you talk about email few years back. Now, not only the email is the attack vector, but COVID-19 has basically significantly increased the need for other collaboration tools. And right, so companies are using those collaboration tools such as SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive from Microsoft Office 365. And that actually doesn't help companies. That even imposes bigger risk to the companies, because for attackers, they are just adding attack surface for them to target. So not only now email is an entry point for the attackers, but basically they can now use SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams to get into the systems as well. There could be exploits which were previously delivered via email, could be delivered via a shareable link in SharePoint. And then those could be used to target the companies. So for attackers, things are becoming more and more available. And for the companies, it's becoming difficult to protect all of those. And now if you are in Microsoft Office 365, it does provide basic and even advanced detection capabilities as well, as it is shown here, that Microsoft Office 365 has various packages, various different options and configurations and license types that you can buy. But studies have again shown that the basic detection capabilities of Microsoft is not good enough. There is a very lower percentage even for the traditional commodity attacks. And if you really want to go and have protection for advanced attacks like phishing or other kinds of advanced targeted attacks, then you have to pay more. And even after you pay more, as it is shown with the advanced threat protection, there is no guarantee that you will get more protection, but it is still on the same level as the basic protection package that you buy. So what more you can do? You, of course, need to protect your resources on top of the basic email security that Microsoft platforms provide. And that's where we, as an F-Secure, comes into picture. With F-Secure Cloud Protection for Microsoft Office 365, our focus is not only on the traditional threats, because we know that we have to cover those. There is no hideaway from these traditional commodity attacks. But even from the get-go, we do provide protection for advanced threats and zero-day malwares, exploits. And why so? Because we have internal our own sandboxing capabilities, which we use to detonate the files which are otherwise unknown, but we on the runtime detonate those and find out what is the behavior of those files, and we can tell you within few minutes if an unknown file which was not seen before is also a malware or a ransomware or an exploit. So we cover now the advanced threats as well. And we don't stop there. In addition to that, we also cover other targeted attacks, as I mentioned. So phishing, which gets sophisticated, compromised accounts. I'm going to talk about in a moment about the very new feature that we are going to launch next month about detecting those compromised or breached accounts. So how you can really detect those even with our one solution. You don't need to buy complex licensing, or you don't need to buy different packages, but with the one package you get all in with our product. So to highlight, this is the current functionality that we provide. As I mentioned, advanced protection for Exchange Online. So we are by default protecting you not only from the commodity or traditional malware based attacks, but also from the zero day. And how we do it is using our sandboxing technology, which is an inbuilt technology that we have and that is hard to bypass. We are quite successful in detecting malware using our internal sandboxing technology, which we have been using in our internal systems from years, and now we just managed to make it more available as a sandboxing technology. Then needless to say that we from years as F-Secure, we are using multi-layered security. Multi-layered security in the sense that we don't rely specifically only on static detections, but we have different systems in which we use layered security, that we first definitely check the reputation if a threat is already known. But if it is unknown, then we have capabilities in our cloud systems to analyze further the content, be it a file or a URL. We do the specific content analysis, and then basically that's how our security is not depending on just one layer of commodity attacks, but different multi-layer technologies that we have. And we have security analytics. So for any security or protection product, if it doesn't provide good capabilities for the administrator to manage the alerts that are being generated by the system, then it's of not much use to the administrator, because for administrator, it's not one alert, it's not two alerts, but there might be significant amount of alert depending on how many users you are dealing with in your company. So having good analytics system which helps you in managing the product helps. And that's the promise of F-Secure Office 365 product, that it does provide you good event handling system and management system. And we also provide role-based administration. So from the get-go, depending on what type of company you have, or what is the seat size, or what is the level of the different admins that you have, you can basically define what the role of the administrator is. So in the company, you could have one system administrator who do everything about the product, but then other could just have access to quarantine management, and then all he do is release or review the quarantine content, and that's it. And then for another a management sort of user, you can have a read-only access who occasionally sees, okay, is the system working correctly? Is everything protected? And so on and so forth. So we provide different levels of roles for the administration. And then seamless integration. We are a cloud native solution. So for deploying Microsoft Office 365 and then deploying our product on top of that, as soon as you have a tenant, it takes maximum 5 minutes to get up and running with F-Secure Cloud Protection or Microsoft Office 365. And that's because we are cloud native. We use APIs to integrate with. And as soon as you deploy our product, you get protection from that second onwards. So those were the features that we already have in the product, but we don't stop there, as our promise is that we will protect you not only from the basic attacks, but also from advanced attacks as well. So we have now in works the compromise breach accounts detection. So next month we are going to launch this feature. So what this feature is that if your employee accounts, email address, password was part of any public breaches or private breaches, which happens, like there are employees in the company, no matter what kind of policy you have, people will reuse their existing accounts, people will use their existing usernames and passwords in other places as well. And that's where you get target for the attackers, because they exploit systems which are easy to target, and social media is one of that. And then if you reuse your company credentials in social media platforms, then the breach happens there, and then actually indirectly your company account gets compromised. So what we are doing in this first version of compromise or breach account detection is that as soon as you deploy our product, you will get information that how many of your existing employee accounts are part of these already detected breaches. And then not only that, we provide you information, what was the breach, when did it happen, but also we correlate that information with Microsoft information. So if a breach happens somewhere in the history, and since then your employee have used multi-factor authentication, have changed the password, then the likelihood that his account is affected is very less. But in case that your employee's plain text password was breached and he has not changed password even after the breach because he was not informed that there was such breach, sometimes these breaches remains like out of the public eye because attackers try to keep them as private. So in that case, your employee will never know that such breach had happened, and they just continue using their account without changing any password. And then that means that attacker might have been using that account actively, and you not knowing as an administrator is a problem because that attacker might be in your systems from quite some time. So detecting these kinds of compromises are important because the credentials breaches might have happened in many different forms. That there might be legitimate phishing targets because of which your user's account get compromised, or there might be some other types of public breaches or website breaches where your user's account get targeted. But then detecting all of those is what matters, and this feature will help you in detecting those breaches early on, and then providing you that information as an administrator so that you can help and guide your user to fix those accounts. And then for the next upcoming things, we are going to add SharePoint protection for the platform. So in addition to the email security, whatever features that you see there for malware protection, the URL scanning, file scanning, and sandboxing capabilities, all of those will be available for SharePoint platform as well. And then OneDrive protection. So SharePoint is more like a collaboration tool, but OneDrive is now also becoming quite active as a collaboration tool. So we will add protection for OneDrive platform as well. And then Teams protection. So as mentioned earlier, that COVID-19 has like significantly increased the use for Microsoft Teams. Microsoft itself is is unable to handle the load that the teams is causing, and attackers can very much take leverage of that kind of limitation. So protecting teams is also quite important. And once we add protection for SharePoint and OneDrive for file protection, then teams will automatically get available, because the files in teams chats are shared via OneDrive, and then the files in team channels are shared via SharePoint. So once those are protected, then teams becomes protected automatically for file sharing. Then Outlook inbox rule scanning is another interesting feature, which you generally don't find this feature in the email security products, because once an attacker get access to your credentials, to your account, what is the best thing for him to do? The best thing for him to do is to keep that access as long as possible. As long as he can keep the access, he can cause maximum damage using that user's account. But how can he hide? There might be systems which then highlight to the user that there is a chance that your account is basically having some activities which shows that it might be compromised. So in that case, having Outlook inbox rule scanning helps in detecting, because these attackers use inbox rules to basically manipulate your inbox to hide their activities. If there is a notification coming from a system that tells you there is a phishing campaign launched from your email account, but then attacker looks for such emails, and then they use the Outlook inbox rules to automatically redirect such emails to basically delete it, or to redirect it to a folder, or put it to a folder which is not visible to the user. And in that case, it becomes really difficult to ever get notice that there is an attacker in the system. So having detections for such types of malicious or suspicious inbox rules is very important in protecting such targeted attacks, where attacker is exploiting the users inbox for doing the maximum damage to the company. So these are the features which we will be adding very soon, and we are not stopping here. There are other interesting features coming as well, and hopefully we will get to show them when we get to those features in the coming months. So that was pretty much the information that I wanted to share. But what are the key takeaways that I want you to take away from this is that it is pretty visible that email is still the #1 attack vector, and there is a reason for it. It's used by majority of people. There is no alternative way for organizations to work than using email systems. There are collaboration tools, but you can't really use those for communication purposes, and email is the basic means of communication. So there is no hide out there. You have to use the email system, and if that is the first source of malware, then you have to protect that system as well. Then phishing attacks are used basically for the purpose, or mainly for the purpose, of compromising credentials, which imposes a bigger risk than just saying, okay, there is a phishing campaign. But what that phishing campaign end up doing is compromising your credentials, which imposes a bigger risk to the organization. Thirdly, the collaboration platforms use is increasing, and that is giving attackers more surface to attack. So you have to protect not only your email systems, but you have to protect your collaboration platforms as well. And protection only from commodity attacks, or traditional attacks as they call it, is not enough. You have to provide protection for such advanced attacks as phishing, which leads to then compromised credentials, or attacks which leads to then targeting your C-level employees. So you have to have detections for those types of threats as well. And then built-in cloud email security is not enough. So even though you can use what Microsoft Office 365 security features provide, but you can see from the get-go that those protection features are not enough, and you have to add something to protect your users and your employees on top of that. So that's basically is required whenever you use Office 365 as a platform. That basically concludes what I wanted to share with you. And maybe we can have a look at the questions if there are any, or then we can now open for the questions.
Thank you very much, Nidhi. Good presentation on a really important topic. Thanks for sharing with everyone how F-Secure is viewing the cloud protection for Office 365. Going through the chat, can't see any questions as we speak. So what I'm doing now is that I'm unmuting all attendees. So if one of you out there would like to ask a question to Nidhi, please unmute yourself and just ask out loud. I'll just give it a bit of time here. Okay, no questions, Nidhi. So just to recap, this session has been recorded, and we will make sure to make the link available for all of you guys. So I think just a big thank you, Nidhi, for joining this session, and once again for sharing how F-Secure is viewing the cloud protection for Office 365. And thank you everyone who attended this webinar today. Really appreciate it. So on behalf of the F-Secure team, I would like to say thank you and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you on my behalf as well.
Thank you, Nidhi.